Today, what I read during the month of April. Whoa. Welcome back. Thank you guys for being here, and we will go through these books in a timely manner because there's quite a few. So no particular order. Maybe I'll save a couple for the end that I liked best, something like that. And we'll just jump into it. There's a few that I actually gave little short reviews on, and I'll mention that, and then another review that's coming up that I'll mention as well. So first off, I had Stephen King's Elevation, and I really enjoyed this book. For me, it was like a 5-star read for me because it was just so enjoyable. I just breezed through it. It was interesting. I don't know, there's something about it was lighthearted and enjoyable, and so I really enjoyed it. Basic premise is that we start off with our main character, Scott Carey, and Scott is at the doctor's office, and he's there to see the doctor because he is losing weight without anything like changing in his body. He's not losing weight. So he's trying to figure out throughout the story why that's happening, how that's happening. And as we go along, we meet more people, and it's just a story of his journey, basically, to figure this out. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. So next up, I read, and this one spanned 2 months. Peter Watts' Beyond the Rift. I enjoyed a couple of stories in here, and the rest I didn't really enjoy. I thought it was going to be something having to do with deep sea type adventures, science fiction, something having to do with that. This is based on one story in the book. So this is misleading to me, unfortunately, which is why I was excited to get to it, which I'm a stupid sucker for, picking my choices based on covers half the time. But I mean, that just doesn't that make you want to read it? It makes me want to read it. So, there's one story in here, the first story, which is being told from the perspective of the Thing in the movie The Thing. And that's the premise of the story, is you're seeing what's happening through the alien's eyes. That's pretty good. Then the last story in here is the short story for the book Starfish. And that one's a pretty good story as well. There was a couple other ones that were just like, okay. And I read through them. And there was, I think, one that I just didn't even want to finish. And I just skipped through it. So, which I usually don't do at all, because then I feel like I haven't completed it. And I just feel like a loser or something. I don't know. 2 stars, I think. 2.5, be generous. All right. This one, Cassandra Caw, Nothing But Blackened Teeth. This was a very mediocre book for me. There was not a lot to it, not a lot of substance. It's like a ghost story, but there's no elements of anything kind of remotely creepy or anything in it. It's just, here, let me describe this thing that looks like this, and that's it. And that was basically the intensity of it. There were some little bits of like gore in it, but that was few and far between. And it was written with these really obnoxious like teenage characters that had no depth and really could only use the F word over and over and over and over and over again. And that was how you knew they were teenagers, because they swear all the time. That's, and I don't even think they were teenagers. They were like, early 20s. So it was just, to me, poorly written. Didn't have a lot of substance to it. Was just a quick breeze through read that really, after I do this review, I will probably never remember this book again until someone goes, "Have you read that?" And I'll be like, I think so. because it was just not good. Or I just, maybe that it wasn't not good. It was just like empty. There was not anything to it. I can't look back on this and say there was something about this that I really enjoyed. So the majority, all the rest of them I enjoyed. That one was one of my least favorites. I did really enjoy this one, Cafe Koja Velocities, Velocities Stories. It's a short story collection, and this felt way better than the one I read, Kissing the Bee. I mean, it was written well, but it was like a YA novel. That was just like a drama. Had nothing else. It was just like a drama YA novel. This one was a short story collection that had good substance to it. It was each story had some substance to it, and it was not it wasn't empty. It wasn't, I don't know, like forgettable. There's quite a bit in here, and I think almost all of them I enjoyed. I can't remember really any of them going, man, I didn't enjoy that one. And they all were they all felt like Cafe Koja to me. It was more what I kind of expected or wanted from Koja. So I would highly recommend this if you haven't read like Cypher, or you haven't read any of her other ones, like Scan or Bad Brains or something like that, and you just want to test out and see if you like Koja. I think this is a really good place to start. So there's 13 stories, and they're all weird and great. So H.G. Wells, The Island of Dr. Moreau. That is one of the ones I read next. Absolutely love this cover. One of my favorite Island of Dr. Moreau covers. I have one other that's close, that kind of gets close to being one of my favorite covers, but I think this one is. This was really fun. It was kind of, you probably know the movie or have seen the movie in the past with Val Kilmer. And if you haven't, it's pretty good. Cheese, but you know, it's an old classic. But the book is very enjoyable. It moves right along. It doesn't waste a lot of time drawing out, you know, stuff that doesn't need to be drawn out. It is, the idea is that they're lost on an island. The island has been taken over by scientists who, you know, got kicked out of being a scientist, and he's doing experiments on everything that's there. There's a whole lot in here that's enjoyable. I'd say this is a good read for younger readers that are getting into science fiction that maybe don't know whether they like it or not, because this isn't very extreme sci-fi, and or maybe some horror lovers, because there's like minimal aspects of horror in this too, that like the base of horror kind of thing. And so either one would be, you know, to see if somebody would really enjoy this, they could try this out and see if they like it, and then move on from there. It's a very quick read, 135 pages, so it is a short read that is quite enjoyable. Is it a 5-star? No, but definitely for me like a 4-star read, because it was enjoyable and fun, and you know, I wasn't bored by it. All right, next up, John Scalzi, The Ghost Brigades. This is the next one, or a sequel to The Old Man's War. Old Man's War is like one of my favorite books I've read this year. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It caught me by surprise. I had heard good reviews about it, and I wasn't really thinking I was a super into military sci-fi, and I read that one and I loved it. So I couldn't wait to get to this one, plus the rest of Scalzi's Old Man's War series. I think there's 6 if I remember right. I did really enjoy this. It's not as good, like I said, as Old Man's War, but it was still kind of same vibe to it, and there is some character tie-in stuff that, you know, brings you back to the old one, but it doesn't really attach itself to the first book, Old Man's War. It doesn't really attach itself all that much, other than a few references. So it is kind of its own thing. It does go through and explain some of the aspects of like what is going on, like having a brain pal and things like that. Like it does kind of explain that stuff, but in Ghost or in Old Man's War, you're going to get a lot more in-depth detail and explanation of what those things are. So if you kind of pick this one up first, you might be a little bit lost in some of that stuff, but you do still get a little bit of an explanation. Thoroughly enjoyable though. I can't wait to read the next one. And if they keep going, this will probably be one of my favorite series ever. Old Man's War, fantastic. Ghost Brigades, still excellent. Not as good though, but still enjoyable. It was a fun read for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, all right. Next up. H-Beam Piper, Space Viking. I've been wanting to read this for a while because, well, it's a space Viking, so it just looks cool. Cover looks cool. In my mind, the idea of what a space Viking might be would be kind of cool. It's pretty boring. It's really boring. It is basically a political back and forth, like you're sitting at the desk with like a bunch of political people talking about nonsense for a good chunk of the book. There's so many people too, it's hard to keep track of. There's just a million different people in this book, and it just wasn't enough for me to like sometimes when that happens and you enjoy the book, you'll take notes and you'll be like, okay, so and so is so and so and so, and I don't know, maybe that's just me because I can't follow along, but sometimes I'll keep track of who people are, and this one I didn't care to, because it was boring. And it didn't matter who the person was. I didn't care. I'd pass. 2 stars maybe. All right, next, Invisible Man, and this is also one of my favorite Invisible Man covers. I'm working, I think I have one more H.G. Wells that I had on my list to read, which is War of the Worlds, and then I'll be, done with H.G. Wells on my list of stuff that I have for the year. But this is a very famous H.G. Wells story. It was okay. It was a good premise, but I don't think that there was a lot done with it. Pretty much the story goes that this guy somehow figures out to make invisibility a thing in humans. Tells a funny story where he does it to a cat, and then the cat gets out, and like that was pretty interesting to me to imagine an invisible cat running around the city, and how like how obnoxiously annoying that would be if you were, the cat wanted to get in your garbage or got stuck under your house or something. Like how, I don't know. It just, that one made me think of like how funny that would be if something like that happened. But anyways, the story goes on. He's, trying to figure out what to do. He's basically a rat that wants to do wrong. So you can imagine some of the things that he does, or you can read it and find out for yourself. Three and a half stars for me. It was enjoyable, but it also it was enjoyable, but I also was a little bit excited to be done with it. Peter Watt's Starfish. So I did a little review about this one, as well as Beyond the Rift. If you want a little more detail, you can go check it out. It's kind of a weird book for me because it started off really good, and what was going on in the beginning of the story was like, oh, that's interesting, that's fun. I want to know what's going on, and then it kind of bogs down quite a bit. The characters and the story are not likable at all. Like there's a few that you just detest and I have no sympathy for, and I have no care for, and I don't like, who gives a rip what happens to this person really, which is not a great you know, obviously if it was a real human being, I wouldn't say that, but it's not a real human being. It's a fictional character in a book. So I can say I don't care about him. You don't care about the person, right? You don't have any sympathy whatsoever for him. The main character is not great either. Then towards the end of the book, things start ramping up. You start getting a little more information that actually starts, you know, making some progress in the story, that you start to care about what's going to happen. And then afterwards, when I was done reading it, I kind of had like a feeling of like, was that any good? Like, I don't know. But the longer it sat with me, the more it kind of like resonated, and there was some more to it that I enjoyed. It was definitely not a 5-star read for me. But I would say now it's probably a 4. Yeah, 4. It made me want to read the next one, so we'll give it that. At first, I didn't want to. At first, when I was done, I was like, I don't really care. But after a little while, I'm like, I kind of want to know about this now, and it's a little bit sticking with me a little bit more. So, yeah. Next up, and these aren't in order. I don't remember which order I read. I mean, I kind of remember a couple which order I read them in, but not all of them. Next up, I read the next one in the Murderbot Diaries. First one was boring. Second one was better because it was less about like, hi, let's see how clunky and dorky this robot is. It's more, there's more of a story to this. The robot, to me, is not interesting at all. I don't know why this book is praised so highly. They're not that good. They're pretty mediocre. Even the story in this one's pretty mediocre. But it had more depth to it than the very first one, that's for sure. And maybe that's why they're praised so much, because as they go along, they get better. I don't know, but first one not that enjoyable. Second one, more enjoyable. And it is a Hugo and Nebula award-winning series. So maybe it's because, maybe the whole series gets better as we go. I don't know. There's not much to say about this. Felt like a short, little novella about a robot adventure again that wasn't I don't love the robot, so I don't really care what's going on. But the other characters they added to the story kind of made it a little more interesting. I don't know. Let me tell you this. I read this with my daughter. It's about a cyborg. 1,000 times better than this. To me, this was 1,000,000 times better than reading this. That's kind of saying something. So, really good. I can't wait to read the next one of this one. This was thoroughly enjoyable. This is a chunky one too. This is a Lunar Chronicles, and there's a whole series, and it's a very loose take on like Disney type princess stories. Not even Disney, like fairy tales, like Cinderella. This one's like Cinderella, Cinder. Very loosely based. There's not a lot to it other than, the basic structure of her being like a stepdaughter and a stepmother and stepsisters kind of thing. It is about a cyborg who works as a mechanic for her evil, wicked, mean stepmother, and there's a lot more that goes on that doesn't have to do with anything having to do with Cinderella. There's a plague in the city that's gone on. They are in New Beijing, and this plague takes place, and people are dying from it, and the only way that they can test for a cure has to be from cyborgs. So there's a random generated selection of cyborgs being picked to be tested on, but the problem is when they're tested on, they don't survive. So there's an issue there. There's other issues that go on. There's a whole another world that's involved, and there is a blend into other stories that are to come that I can see already that make it exciting as well. So I will do a little review or Q&A maybe with my daughter on this one, because we both went through it together. And this is probably the first big giant book that she read, and she's excited. Like, she asked me today, can we start the next one? Can we read Scarlet tomorrow? So that's super exciting to me, and I want her to be able to talk about it and explain her feelings for it as well. And we just really enjoyed it. So Cinder, one of my favorites for the month, really. That's pretty awesome. It is very sci-fi. It is extremely sci-fi. There's androids and cyborgs and future city and hovercrafts and all kinds of stuff. And it's really enjoyable. So another one that I really enjoyed, and I was I kind of had a feeling I was going to enjoy it, but I like really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent, is The Troop by Nick Cutter. And I'm excited to read The Deep. Is that right? I have it around here somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's The Deep. I'm really excited to read the next one. They're not tied together, I don't think. So this one is about a group of scouts that go on a trip to an island, and they're staying there for like, I think it was like 3 days. And then after 3 days, then someone comes to pick them up. They're there with their scoutmaster, Tim, and they are, just being scouts. They're, camping, and they're going on hikes, and they're exploring, and that kind of stuff. So they're out on this island, and this mysterious guy shows up, and he is sick. And you find out a little bit before about him being sick or someone else being sick. And then it kind of unravels from there. There is some some gore in this, some graphic detail of stuff that goes on with the body. This is told in an interesting way, where there is you read you read about what's going on, and then you have also in the next chapter you have another account that's going on, so you go back and forth a little bit, and it adds to it. It builds the characters, and it's done really well. This is it is about the characters, but it's also about what's going on. It's a nice blend. I think I don't really enjoy just straight up like a character explanation the whole time, and you get to know this character, because if you don't like that character, you're not going to like the book. So when it's nice that you have a few characters and you have a story going through, and you're learning about some of them, and you may not happen to like one of them, that's fine. And I don't know, to me it's a little more enjoyable of a read. So definitely good, definitely not for everybody. There's queasy moments for some people, I'm sure. So if you're squeamish about things going on with the body, you might be grossed out. So I'd be cautious in that instance. But if you like that kind of stuff, you'll like this book. Next up, I read Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I just went on a little trip for the weekend. I went to go, there's this big warehouse book sale, and they do it like every 6 months or so. So I usually try and go and, stay the weekend or whatever, and I go to the warehouse sale, and then I'll hit up all the thrift stores in the area and try and buy as many sci-fi horror books as I can find, or that are worth buying. And so I brought this with me to read while I was there. I was pleasantly surprised. I had no clue, but it is signed by Mr. Ellison, which is pretty crazy. So I looked up on eBay just to see a signed copy, and I didn't even know, but this copy by itself, just this edition, which is in really, really, really good shape, is pretty valuable by itself. So to have it signed, it's quite a bit more. So, which is really cool. Anyways, I really enjoyed this. It's only 7 short stories. But there is an introduction by Theodore Sturgeon, and then a foreword by Harlan Ellison. And then in between each short story, there's more author description about that story or what was going on in his life at the time. And all those little things together made it really enjoyable. I don't know if the other copies have, like, I don't know if they all have that same introduction, his foreword, the notes in between. I don't know. I would think that they have the notes in between at least. But it made it even more enjoyable to read the stories, but then also know what he was, like, why he was writing that, or what happened to bring that about into his, into his mind to conceive or to write about. So the shorts are good. They're all pretty good. I don't think there's anyone in here that wasn't, like, enjoyable. They aren't the best. They're not, like, extremely good writing. He even talks about himself like he's kind of a hack writer, he says, but he's gotten better. He talks about that, like, it's been 10 years and now I'm an overnight success, and he's pretty arrogant sounding, and he knows it and he's fine with it. So it's kind of cool to read and to hear his insight into the stories that were written. So worth grabbing a copy of. That one will not be out for sale at any point in the near future. Sorry. All right, next up I read Frozen Hell, which is John W. Campbell Jr.'s found, like, I want to say found footage, but found pages, found chapters to his short story, The Thing. The short story, The Thing, is derived from his story that was written in 1938, and it is called Who Goes There? And they recently found in a museum where he had stored a bunch of documents, the extended version of that short story, Who Goes There? And this has, I believe, 45 more pages worth of story. So that is really interesting. It was something I had to grab. I love The Thing. The Thing was made into a movie and then redone by John Carpenter, which is probably the most famous one that we all know about and love, and has become our favorite over the years, one of our top sci-fi movies of all time. And The Thing was created then for film in that way by John Carpenter, who's famous for doing all, like, actual animatronics and stuff like that in the film. Then that film adaptation was written here in a book collection by Alan Dean Foster, and book form by Alan Dean Foster. Also in the book, there is a preview to the potential sequel, which is loosely titled The Things from Another World, which is they say in here, a nod to the Howard Hawks film. I think it's written by John Gregory Betancourt, and they're hoping to get the rights to it so they can write a sequel. There is like 3 chapters in here, 3 or 4 chapters from that book. And it's interesting. It's 4 chapters. In book 2, the preview, basically they find another thing and it starts off from there. It's not a continuation of the sequel or of the first one. So anyways, so I read then also this one, manga. It is Gaio by Junji Ito. So I really enjoyed reading that one last month, and so I thought, well, I'll read this one before I got a bunch of these from my good friend who was going to donate a bunch of stuff, or trade it into the bookstore to see what they would give him, and I decided hey, I'll buy them from you. So I bought a bunch of stuff from him to resell, but I was like, well, kind of want to read it too. So I decided to read this one. I have another one upcoming on the list to read. This one does have some serious body horror to it. If you are into that, basically these like fish creatures, I'll show you a picture of one of them at least. These like fish creatures with legs come cruising up out of the sea, and they rip a bunch of gas out of their bodies, and that makes people sick, and it's unstoppable, and the stench is horrid and causes chaos. And then there's a lot of stuff that goes on that's just weird, weird, creepy stuff in there. So that was a pretty short read and just fun to read. So next up, Hyperion is one of the ones that I read this month that I really enjoyed. I can't wait to get to the sequels. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I didn't know it was going to be told in like 6 or 7 parts. Like it's like a story of there's these people traveling on this journey to go visit Hyperion, and they are basically recounting their connection to it somehow through past things that have gone on, and so why they're really headed that way. So it is, I want to say 7 stories, but anyways, it was like a fun, enjoyable read. There's some stories that I just could care less about, and I was like, come on, man. I found when reading this, I realized that a lot of these writers basically write out their fantasies that they can never fulfill in books. And I'm like, okay, bro, it's not necessary, right? It's kind of ridiculous. So you don't need to do that. There's some silly, goofy, stupid stuff in this book, but there is some great, awesome stuff in this book as well. It was not filled with that kind of stuff. There was like just a story or two like that. So Hyperion, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was a great book, fun to read. It wasn't completed for me. There's 3 more, so I want to keep reading them and find out what's going on, and hopefully we get, you know, a little more backstory or details into what's happening. So it was enjoyable, worth the read. All right, finally we got Stir of Echoes. I did a little review on this one, short little review. It is an enjoyable read, probably one of my favorites for the month. It was a fun read, an easy read. The more I read Matheson, the more I love Matheson, and can't wait to get into more. The basic idea is that this couple goes over to another couple's house, and you know they're playing around, having fun, and one guy goes, "Hey, let me hypnotize you," and you know he hypnotizes them, and then basically he unlocks some, you know, something supernatural in his brain, really, and then he starts being able to see things that are going on, and so it causes him terror and chaos. He starts to worry for his family and doesn't know how to stop it, and so therefore, you know, the terror comes in. So it was a really enjoyable one. I highly recommend it for anybody who loves vintage type horror. I mean, if you like the movie back in the day, it's not the same, but you probably would enjoy this if you like that basic premise of the movie back in the day. I don't really know what to compare it to, but it's just a good read, and it's not a crazy long read or anything. So I think 200 and something pages, not even that, 160 pages. So it's a fairly short read. I think I read it in like 3 sittings before bed, and it was, you know, easy to get through because you want to read it too. So you breeze through it. So that was it. That was it for the month. Pretty good reading month. Which one of those is your favorites? Which one do you like? Have you read? Which one do you want to read now? I don't know. Let me know. I'd love to find out. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for stopping in, you guys. Appreciate it. Have a great, awesome reading month in May. And I'll let you know what I get through at the end of that month. And I think I'll have a little update video on what I'm going to be reading for the rest of the year, what I've kept or added or things like that. So look forward to that with you guys soon, and thanks again for stopping in. Catch you on the next one.